my name is Faith Duston. I am a communication student here at Vanguard. I also am a senior, so I get to graduate next spring. Super exciting. I'm also a big fan of creative writing. I do events, lots of creative stuff. I don't know, we'll see where God takes me. So yeah, and this is my story. So I guess I'll start off with where I was raised and born. Well, born and raised. And I was born in Savannah, Georgia, actually, which is not even close to here at all. But one really interesting little fact is that I was born out there. I don't remember anything because my dad ended up getting a job opportunity out here. And so my family moved to Burbank in LA about when I was about 2 years old. And so it was really just Burbank that I remember. I went back to visit Savannah, Georgia when I was 16, and that was really amazing to see where I was born and where I was, where my parents met. And yeah, and so basically a lot of my childhood, I was raised in a family that was Christian, but we went back and forth between attending every Sunday, church hopping, and only attending on holidays. And so I wouldn't say my family was particularly lukewarm, but I definitely wasn't really raised knowing the Bible besides occasional youth group and the occasional also like youth camp. And so that was really interesting. I knew God as a kid and as I grew up, and I knew kind of about him and who he was, but not really his full character. It wasn't until I became a teenager and we were attending a home church in Sunland called The Hub, where I had finally kind of encountered God on my own for the first time. And again, like I said, I wasn't really raised in a biblically literate household or where like the Bible was used as a basis to teach us different lessons. But going to church as a teenager regularly was definitely helpful in just raising me up in the Word in some type of way. And so it was really interesting because I had gone to a couple of camps, and at these camps I was like, you know what, God, like I want more of you. I want to know about you, but I can't hear you. And so my relationship with God is a little bit tricky because as a kid and even as a teenager, it almost felt like I was like angry at God a lot of the time. Angry that he wasn't speaking to me in a certain way or that he wasn't like clear with me. And I don't think I fully could comprehend the concept that God speaks to us in different ways. And then I think another part of it too is the age of accountability changes person to person. And so I think that was important to take into account as well. And so in high school middle school and high school when I was attending the Hub in Sunland with my family, my parents ended up splitting. They ended up getting a divorce from one another. I must have been about 14 when this happened. And that was something that really rocked my world. The Hub was always a home church up until that point. It felt very broken to be there after the divorce because my dad did continue to attend the church while my mom had a strong resentment towards the church due to a lot of the problems that they faced during the divorce and due to kind of feeling like there was some favoritism in the church. And so as a teenager looking for someone to blame, my mom was very quick to share her feelings about my dad with me. And again, I was like 13, 14 at this time. Probably not the best age to be sharing personal information about a marriage, but nonetheless, it happened. And I grew very distant from my dad. Simultaneously at this time, I had gone to 2 specific youth camps. One was in Big Bear in the winter, I think my sophomore year of high school. And then the second one was a summer camp, and I don't know if that was sophomore year, I don't quite remember. But both camps were really significant to me, but particularly the summer one, because at that summer camp, I had met a woman, multiple people had come up and pray for me because I was always very quick to run to the altar because I wanted to know more about God and I wanted to dedicate my life to him. And so I did pursue him at these camps, particularly at this summer one, and I had one woman who approached me the first day we were there and just started asking me a lot of questions that seemed very poignant, that didn't make sense for her to ask because it was someone I had never met in my life. It almost seemed like she knew things about me that, one, I didn't know about myself, and two, I did know about myself, but she shouldn't have known, considering she didn't know me before this youth camp. So that kind of opened my eyes, and I was like, interesting, like, you know, like, how does this person know so much about me? It must be God, because it wouldn't make sense any other way. And then I remember one of the evening services, I remember going up to the altar for prayer, and this woman praying over me, and she prayed over me being able to hear God. And it was really interesting because at that camp in specific, this summer camp, I was, again, very angry, just not hearing from God, not knowing what he wanted for me. And so that anger and resentment only continued to build. And I think my confusion also continued to build, because although the prayer was super poignant to what I was dealing with in the time, it didn't feel like that prayer was answered in the time that I wanted it answered. And that's been a continuous journey for me, even up to this point, is just realizing that God's timing is perfect and that I can't push anything, and that he will reveal things to us and put us down paths in his perfect timing. And so trusting that has always been difficult. However, here I am. I'm kind of okay. So the timing and the trust thing is definitely something that God's working in my heart. Anyways, and so at this summer camp, this woman prayed over me. I had others pray over me, and it was just really shocking because, again, things just came up from these prayers and from these women that didn't really make sense, that they would know, that I guess logically it just didn't make sense because they didn't know me. It was like first interactions with these people, and they were saying things about me that they would only know if they knew me. And so looking back now, I know that that was God speaking to me through those people in their own unique ways, which was really cool. But fast forward, my mom and I got really close after my parents divorced. I was always really close with my dad as a kid, but our relationship kind of went downhill once I became a teenager, especially in the midst of a divorce that was very messy. And also just there was a lot of bitterness and tension between the two parents through the divorce. And so that led to a lot of different issues, among which one was my mom sharing information that she shouldn't have, I personally think, as I was too young to understand the full situation or comprehend what was going on. And so through the information she shared, I developed a strong resentment against my dad, a strong hatred, I would even say, for my dad. And surprisingly, again, I was close with him as a young child, so to go and switch it so much is very hard to look back at, and it's hard to come to terms with the fact that I was really, really, really mean to him as a kid or as a teenager. I said probably some of the worst things I've ever said in my life to my dad at that time, because I thought I was justified. I thought my dad was this evil person that my mom had told me he was. And part of me wanted to fight for my mom. I wanted to defend her, and I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt and really just almost be an advocate for my mom. So the divorce was really messy. I went on through high school, continued to struggle with a multitude of things. I experimented with drugs. I got into relationships that were messy and wrong. I just kind of went my own way. I always believed there was a God. I didn't know what that God was or who he was completely. I didn't have a full picture, especially with that resentment towards God. Like, not hearing him was really hard to walk through as a kid. And so I just kind of went my own way. I as a teenager just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I didn't see a problem with it. And my senior year of high school rolls around, and still a very tense relationship with my dad and a decent relationship with my mom, but at this point it was falling apart because I think I started to see the cracks that I hadn't realized before then, and the fact that our relationship was based solely on basically bashing my dad and just being really, really awful in the way that we spoke about my father. Those things started to show, and I started dating my current boyfriend, and him and I have been together now for 4 years, so that was really exciting. Once I got out of high school, I kind of realized a lot of the friends that I was spending time with were not great influences, and so I went through a really unhealthy phase where, similar to how my mom deals with situations like this, if I didn't agree with my friends, I would just stop talking to them. And this is something I've learned from, and it was a really hard lesson to learn. But I know now that it doesn't work that way. You're not supposed to just cut people out of your life like that. And so those relationships, at least most of them, I can say have been mended, which is really, really great, and such a wonderful way that God is showing himself through me, I think. Because if you would have asked me like 3-4 years ago, if I would have been friends with these people who I had deliberately decided to like remove from my life, I would have been like, no, you're crazy. Like, of course not, because they're doing X, Y, and Z. But I have come to understand that we are to love people no matter who they are, where they are. And also I do care for these people. I want to know how they are and what they're up to, even if they're Christian, not Christian, doesn't matter. Of course, boundaries are important, and that's another thing I'm walking through. And I think God is definitely revealing how to have healthy boundaries, and that boundaries can be really good for relationships. Anyways, back to graduating from high school. I graduated high school, kind of left a lot of the friends that I had through high school, which was really hard to walk through after the fact. And so it was kind of just me and my boyfriend for a while. And then COVID hit, and COVID shut everything down, as we all know. It also created this very animalistic, hostile atmosphere, especially on social media, but within the family, within friend groups, within companies, just everywhere. You could see the hostility and the animalistic kind of nature of what COVID did to our nation and how people reacted to that. Not only was it COVID, but it was also a lot of political and governmental kind of problems and issues that drew that out. And I've always been someone who kind of wanted to go against the grain. And as much as I like to go against the grain and kind of be a little bit different from everyone else, that also led to me feeling very outcasted for a lot of my life up until this point. This has been something I've been working through as well, and I feel like here at Vanguard, I've found a lot of community, and I felt like a part of the Vanguard family in a sense, especially getting involved on campus has helped me in that area a lot. But COVID and like the political problems that were going down in, I think it was 2019 or 2020, I don't remember exactly which year, but that summer was really rough for me. I was very open about what I thought about what was going on. I was very, I questioned a lot of what was going on. Initially, I was very on board with what everyone was saying on social media, and then eventually I kind of grew and kind of wanted to figure it out for myself rather than follow and repost all of these different things that were being said. And through that kind of phase of figuring out what I believed and what I thought was right and what was wrong, I ended up seeing a lot of backlash on social media. A lot of really painful things happened where I was open about my views, or I was almost like, I believe I was a little too prideful, and I think part of this was what God wanted to show me was that I was being a little bit too forward with what I believed and the things that I was questioning, and that I should be more loving and gentle and not so much make it like a political thing, or things like that, I guess, along the lines of that. And so I ended up receiving a lot of backlash from people that I had known most of my life, if not all of my life. People I was best friends with ended up turning around basically on a dime and posting me, telling people to block me and remove me and all this other stuff. And that was really hard because I think we're all human, and I don't see why there's such a problem with agreeing to disagree. Although I do wish I would have been more gentle with my opinion online. And so through this, I was also starting to get anonymous death threats. I was starting to get anonymous messages from people who knew me or didn't know me and told me, like, you should kill yourself. You know, you need to go to a psychiatrist, you're crazy, yada, yada, yada. Which really hit home with me because another thing that I really struggled with in high school was I was diagnosed with MDD, which is major depressive disorder, and general anxiety disorder, partially because of mental illness running through my family. And then another part of it was just that the divorce, I think, was really hard for me to walk through, even though I wasn't very open about how hard it was at the time. I was really good at playing it off, and I'm the oldest sister of 3 brothers now, but at the time it was only 2 brothers, and I felt my responsibility was to care for them and spin the divorce in whatever way I could to make it a positive situation for them. And so I remember telling my brother Jude, I was like, so, you know, it's okay, like, we'll be fine, you know, we'll have 2 Christmases, we'll have 2 birthdays, like, it'll be fun, we'll have 2 houses, 2 rooms. Tried to spin it in a positive light, and I think that led to a lot of, like, suppressed emotions and beliefs and understandings when it came to my parents' divorce, because I felt this heavy responsibility to care for my brothers and be the one who was kind of level-headed and okay, I guess. And so anyways, back to the COVID stuff. I was really walking through a lot of hard stuff. I was already very, like, isolated before COVID, but COVID made it even worse, especially with the anonymous threats and messages and the blatant outcast kind of feeling that I was getting. And so I ended up losing even more friends from high school. I ended up stirring up a lot of problems with people. I wouldn't say problems, I guess, but more just people were really not happy that I was saying things online or open about my views online because they didn't agree with their views. And so it was definitely a very hard time for me, very isolated. I had Trevor still at this point. I was still very close with him, and him and I kind of stuck together, which is really great. But at this time, I was also very suicidal. And this was something I dealt with in high school a little bit, but it hadn't gotten to the point that it did at this time, I guess. In COVID, it was worse than it had ever been. And so I was like, well, the only thing I can really do is read this Bible. Like, this is the only thing that I have left. Like, all right, God, like, if you're going to show yourself or speak to me, like, this is going to be the moment, because I don't know, like, if I can do this anymore. And I remember reaching out to one of my boyfriend's family members, and I was like, you know, she loves the Lord. Like, she has verses in her house. I'm going to reach out to her and ask. And so I reached out to her, and I was like, look, I've tried to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I cannot get past Genesis. What do you recommend, and where do I start? And so she told me start in Psalms and Proverbs. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but I am a creative writer, and so poetry is a big thing for me. And little did I know, Psalms and Proverbs are 2 books of, well, I guess Proverbs is like wisdom literature, but Psalms is poetry, and I guess Proverbs is too. But regardless, they both are very poetic in their form and in the way that they're written, and I was able to connect almost instantaneously with them. So I read Psalms at night and Proverbs in the morning for about a week, and within that week I ended up encountering the Lord in a way I literally cannot comprehend still to this day or describe. This is still during like the very heavy COVID situation. Another thing that I didn't mention earlier that I should have, once I graduated from high school, I stopped talking to my dad for about 6 months. And that was really interesting. I ended up cutting off contact with him because I felt like he was being very controlling over me. But I think that was just more the teenage side of me that was rebellious, and also what my mom had told me, that combination was not good. And so at this point, when I started reading the Bible, I also started to reach out to my dad again after 6 months of not speaking to him. And he was so loving, so welcoming, considering all of the stuff that I had put him through, so compassionate beyond anything I could have ever imagined or hoped for. Definitely reflects God's forgiveness and compassion for us, even though we are so wicked sometimes and we go our own way. And so I encountered God, or Jesus, and it was so interesting because I went from dealing with suicidal thoughts to feeling just a peace and a joy in my heart, and then also a desire to make things right. With friends, with family, so on and so forth. And so I started spending more time with my dad. I decided to commit my life to the Lord. Officially at that point, I think this was like the point where I had fully decided, like, I'm all in with you, Lord. I don't want anything else. I don't want anyone else. This is all I want. And so I decided to go all in with the Lord. I started listening to worship music, attending church regularly, looking for opportunities to get involved in church. I started going to women's ministry. I didn't know whether or not they had a young adults group, so I just went to the women's group, which was also very interesting. It was mostly moms, but it was so cool just to get, I felt like a sponge, like I was just soaking up so much wisdom, and it was really wonderful. At this point, my relationship with my boyfriend got a little tricky because I had gotten saved so instantaneously, and I was like, Lord, like, I want to be obedient to you. I don't know if this is your will here for my life. However, I trust that you will give me the courage to do something about the situation if need be. And if not, then like do your work, do your magic. Well, not magic, but do your work in our relationship and in my boyfriend's life. And so through that, my boyfriend also got saved and has been following the Lord as well. And simultaneously, my relationship with my mom just continued to just spread apart further and further. She had always been very against the church, especially after the divorce. She was very anti-God, anti-church, anti-Christian, just generally. Basically any other religion was fine, but Christianity she was very against. To the point where once I had been saved and walking with the Lord, we got into a situation probably a couple weeks within me getting saved where we got into an argument, and I was really trying to be gentle and loving and understanding of her dislike for the religion that I began to practice. And the God that I began to worship, and I wanted to be careful and not, step on her toes or anything. And so I decided to kind of just engage in friendly conversation with her, but of course not push anything if it was too uncomfortable. But she was definitely very against it, so I decided against speaking about it too much or too often. I was listening to worship music in my room, doing my own thing. And at this time, I was living with her full time, when as a kid I was switching back and forth every week. And so it got to the point where my mom kind of flipped out, and she told me that she didn't like my religion and she didn't agree with my political stances or my political beliefs. And she told me that I had to find a new place to live. And thankfully, I was in contact with my dad. Otherwise, I don't know where I would have gone. So she had me move out, and I took everything and I moved to my dad's. And so my dad at the time was seeing a woman who also had a son, and that's my third brother, LJ. And my other two brothers, Liam and Jude, were also living with him or Liam would switch every week and Jude would stay full-time with my dad. And they had their own rooms. My dad had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath kind of house that he was renting, and my brothers all had rooms in the house. And basically he was like, you can come stay here, but I don't have a room for you. And I was like, that's totally fine, I don't need a room. Which was really shocking because I had grown up with my own room. Since I was the only girl in the family, I always had my own bedroom. And so I went from having my own bedroom for about 18-19 years to sleeping on a couch. And it was the best my dad could do, and I'm so grateful that he even allowed me to be there and be a part of his family again after all the stuff we had been through. And I was sleeping on his couch for about a year. And after that year, I had transferred into Vanguard as a transfer student. And through that time, just continued to grow in the Lord. It was really amazing to see just like the fire that I had for God in my heart after such a tumultuous, difficult time with COVID and my mom and all these other things. And God's faithfulness was just all over the place. It was written over everything. And so I continued to just go deeper with the Lord. I started an in-house Bible study with some friends of mine who were Catholic, and my brother would join and my boyfriend would join, and we would just randomly like pick a book in the Bible and read through it. One of my favorites was Esther. That was really cool just to see how, I don't know, God is in that story, even though it's the one book where he's not mentioned. And I decided to go to Vanguard, of course. I didn't have any kind of knowledge of Vanguard at all, until I got like a random like, oh, you can apply for free. And I was like, well, great, because I don't have any money, so we're gonna apply. And through the free application fee situation, I applied, got in, and I was like, you know what, I might as well go tour the campus then, since I got in. And so I came down and toured it with my boyfriend. And instantly when I stepped on campus, I was just at peace. I knew that this was where I was meant to be, where God wanted me to be. And I was like, okay, God, like I'm going to attend school here. Like I know this is where you want me. And so I transferred out here, moved into a dorm for my first year, which was last year. And I thought like, wow, you know, it's a Christian school. How could I get far from God? And almost instantaneously got so caught up in all of the excitement of moving out, living in a dorm, being on campus, that I completely lost sight of, well, I wouldn't say completely lost sight of the Lord, but I definitely ended up in a desert season, which was really difficult to walk through, because I was like, what the heck, I'm on a Christian campus, like how could I have a hard time? You know, I thought it was going to get easier from here. And silly of me to think, because the walk is never going to be easy. However, as a young Christian, I guess, walking with God, that was something I had to learn. And so basically around this time last year, I went into a very deep depression. I was really struggling to stay involved, and I was really having a hard time because I wasn't staying in my word, and I couldn't muster up the strength to do it or to even stay focused in school. I was placed in quarantine a couple times. Once was because I was in contact with someone with COVID. The second time I did have COVID. And those days in isolation were really, really difficult and ended up accentuating my isolation and my depression that I had dealt with once again, that I thought was completely healed. And so the winter also was very isolating. I just kept to myself, and then came back in the spring after we had to delay classes by a week, and just wasn't in it anymore. I really struggled my spring semester last year, probably more than I've ever struggled in school, financially and academically, and in terms of like my friendships. Nothing was going right, and that rolled over into the summer as well. And I had applied to SFD for this current year, and I was like, okay, God, like, I feel like this is where you would want me to be, but I just don't know. And so I applied, ended up getting a position as assistant chaplain. And so that was really, really cool. But once the summer kind of came to a close, I was like, what the heck, I don't want to go to this retreat. There was a leadership retreat that every student in student leadership is invited to, and I just couldn't do it. I was like, there's no way. But I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. It's a retreat, how bad could it be? And I think part of it was that my heart didn't want to encounter God or like be face to face with a lot of the things that I had been struggling with. And I went to this retreat, and it ended up being healing beyond comparison. I was able to meet my team that I am now currently working with in SFD, and they are so amazing. I love them all. I've never felt more welcome in a group like I have in SFD, which is really interesting, or just really exciting to feel like family as someone who has always felt like an outcast. And I was healed of a lot of the things I was dealing with. The depression, anxiety, just gone, like pretty much instantaneously, once I was prayed over, and once people spoke into my life, and after sharing a lot of what I was dealing with, it was all just very freeing to me. And ever since then, of course, we go through little like waves in our walk, and sometimes we're reading the word a lot, other times we're not. But I can say that healing has been so monumental to me, and has gone all the way up to now. And the Lord's been doing really, really great things and walking me through a season of faithfulness, teaching me to be more faithful to Him, and also just to trust Him and be more obedient to Him. And so He's opened a lot of doors for me to do things that I would have never expected to do. I'm not a public speaker, and yet I've had the opportunity to speak at chapels twice now. And as a chaplain, introducing and transitioning in Tuesday morning chapels is also something that was very, I guess, like out of the box for me. And it's been really cool to see just how God has given me the confidence to be able to even step on stage and say things, anything, even if it's just like a couple seconds up there. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have been like, no way, I'm never getting on stage for anything that I would do in my life. And yet here I am, because God is so faithful, and He's opened so many doors. And so I just can't wait to see what God does next. And if there's anything that I can encourage you in today, it's that God is a redeemer, and He will redeem anything that you are going through, any relationship that's broken in your life, whether it's through divorce or friendship, or whether it's family. I just want to remind you that God is with you, and He's always beside you, even if you don't realize it. And that's been something that I'm always learning. And the more that you trust Him, the more that you decide to be obedient to Him, the more doors that will open to you, and the more that He'll be able to work in your heart. And that's all of my story. So thank you so much.